Cornell with a degree in civil engineering in May 2012. And but unlike most civil engineers who build buildings and bridges, I build the kingdom of God. Right? I lived in Baltimore, Maryland. I was originally from California, now I live in Baltimore. And yeah, just like that, I do work part-time with Ithaca, which is part of Cru. And I also work part-time with the church. It's a pretty good gig. I know a lot of speakers. Oh, nice. So I won't be following this exactly, because I've made some changes in the car. But I'll be following this a little bit. So I know a lot of speakers show pictures of their wives and kids, but I don't have a wife and I don't have kids, right? So here's a picture of me. I'm eating Dunkin' Donuts in Philadelphia. I do have a girlfriend named VK. This is Van Kim. She's right here. And she went to Chinese Bible study when she was at Cornell. And I went to Cru, so we cross-pollinated. And I hope to marry her one day so that in the future, if I ever give talks like this, then I won't look as lonely. So I love Cru at Cornell. I think Cru, this has been one of the most formative times of my life. I started going to Cru during fall retreat, actually. So if you guys don't know, in 2 weeks from now, there's going to be a fall retreat in upstate New York, and actually I'll be going to. The guy who's speaking is actually the pastor at my church in Baltimore, and he's a really cool dude, and so I highly recommend it. It was on that trip, my freshman year, that really hooked me. That was the first time when I actually had some deep conversations with some people in Cru, and I remember staying up the first night for all the way maybe to like 3 a.m. talking to people about the sovereignty of God, and it was just mind-blowing. And so if you're still on the fence, I recommend that you would go, because that's what I did. And then after you go, then I recommend you stay in Cru, because that's what I did as well. So yeah, definitely do that. In the last 2 weeks, JW sent me some of his notes for the last 2 weeks, and I saw he really fleshed out this word gospel. He talked about the gospel a lot, and I'll be expanding it a little bit. But if you haven't been here, the gospel basically is the story of how God sent His Son Jesus to rescue us from sin and death and to give us new life, right? But this story isn't just a story. I believe it's the greatest story, the original story, the most important story, the most relevant story. This is a story that gives us more meaning and purpose than anything else. And so everybody has a gospel story, okay? And I'll put that in quotes, gospel story. And they might not understand it in the sense of a gospel story. What I mean is that everybody, in a certain way, right, they perceive reality, they find meaning, significance, they find hope, right? They have a certain way of doing that. And that way that they do that, whatever it is, right, we can call that a gospel story, okay? Christians, my gospel story happens to be the Christian gospel, okay? Maybe yours is also, maybe yours isn't. Whatever the case is, that's okay. Maybe you don't even realize that you have a gospel story. Maybe you're not even familiar with that concept, right? After all, maybe like when you meet people for the first time around school, that's not one of the questions you ask. You don't ask, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? What's your major? And what's your gospel story? Like you don't really say that kind of stuff. But even if you don't think that way, inherently we have something called a gospel story, because it's one of the fundamental characteristics of being a human being. A lot of philosophers talk about this, but instead of calling it a gospel story, they call it a worldview. Okay, and that's exactly what I'll be talking about today. So in your emails, if you're on the listserv, you got this picture of me. I found out about it just several hours ago. But this is a picture of me, and it says, what does it say? Like, what's the Bible and why do we read it, or something like that. That's what I agreed to talk about, but I'm actually not talking about that. So sorry. I'll be talking about. I will touch on the Bible. But I'm talking about what a worldview is, what are some characteristics of a worldview, and what is the biblical worldview. But before we plunge in, I just want to back off a little bit. This is why I changed some stuff up in the car. I was talking to VK in the car, and I just realized, like, in many ways, I felt a little bit hypocritical giving a talk, just because the past 2 years or so have been super, I guess my spiritual life has been super, what is this called? Bumpy, that's what I'm looking for. Like on, up, and down, and yeah, just to be honest, like last night I was thinking, man, I should wake up in the morning early and read my Bible, and I didn't. I was in the car and I was, man, I didn't even bring a Bible to Ithaca. Well, I have it on my phone, but you get the point. Like I was, I just felt very hypocritical. But I love the song we just sang, "Let Your Kingdom Come." I love that song. But in verse 2 it says, I didn't know you guys were going to sing it. It says, "Give us your strength, O God, and courage to speak. Perform your wondrous deeds through those who are weak. Lord, use us as you want, whatever the test, by grace, we'll preach your gospel to our dying breath." And that just resonates so much to me because I felt so weak just coming into this that, I felt like Cornell in some sense were like my glory days of my spiritual life. Like I'll look back on my Cornell days and I go, man, I was so on fire, and I just loved the lost, and I just I was always like meeting up with people and encouraging them to meet up with other people, and I was just reading my Bible like all the time, and I was sharing stories about cars, and I just haven't been doing that as much lately. And I don't know if you'll feel it, but a lot of people they graduate and they feel this they just drop into this rut and no one's really above it. No one's really immune to it. You just drop into this rut, and even no matter how awesome supposedly spiritually you were, you go into this rut. And I was in that for a while, and I still am in that a little bit. But that's a little bit of a rant. But I just loved that song. I love that song. Perform your wondrous deeds through those who are weak. So I'll just pray right now because I can't think of a better way to transition to my next point. So I'll pray right now. I'll pray. Father God, I just thank you for this day. Thank you for what you've done in my life, and thank you for what you're doing in these lives. God, the students here in this room, thank you for divinely bringing them here so that they could have a chance to experience a little bit more of you. And God, I don't know where they're all at, but I pray that you would meet them. I pray that you would speak to them. God, I'm weak and I messed up and I fail. But God, I just help me to trust you. Help me to be open to you. Help me to seek your glory, not mine. I pray that you would speak through me and give them what you want to give them. Thank you, and praise our Son's name. Amen. Okay. All right. What's up? Oh yeah. Thanks. What is a worldview? Ravi Zacharias, who's this awesome guy, he says, worldview should answer 4 basic things about your life. Okay. Origin, meaning, morality, destiny. Where are we from? Why are we here? What is right or wrong? And where are we headed? Okay. Norman Geisler, who's another awesome guy, he says, the truth is that a worldview is like colored glasses. It colors everything at which we look. It is a grid through which one views all of life. Such a helps form our thoughts, values, decisions. The tragedy is that most people do not even know what the worldview is, how they got it, and how important it is in their lives. Right? So everybody has a worldview. Everybody has this lens, the way they were raised, maybe the friends they had growing up, or maybe the culture they were in, maybe the TV shows they watched, whatever it is. We're not immune to our society, so we suck in ideas, and they form how we look at the world, right? I remember talking to a guy last year at George Mason University, and we were having a small group discussion. And we were talking about the Bible and stuff, and we asked him a question, and he wasn't a Christian, and he's like, oh, I don't think this question applies to me, because I don't believe that you can have interactions with God. And I just asked, so I'm just curious, why don't you believe that? And he's like, I just don't. That's just what I believe. And then I asked again, but why don't you believe that? And then he paused for a little bit, and he's like, so are you asking me, why do I believe what I believe? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I've never really thought of that before. And I think that's something that every single one of us needs to ask ourselves. Why do you believe the things you believe? If you believe in a God, right? Or if you believe that Jesus was the Son of God, or if you believe that sin exists, or if you believe that mankind has a purpose, or whatever you believe. Why is it that you believe that? Okay, and if you just say, "Oh, the Bible says that," okay, then why do you trust the Bible? Right? I think every one of us needs to ask those sorts of questions. James Sire says, "A worldview is a set of presuppositions, assumptions which may be true, partially true, or entirely false, which we hold consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently about the basic makeup of our world." So we hold these presuppositions, okay? We're not necessarily born with them, but somehow we inherit them, okay? Somehow. They might be true, they might be false, right? They might be conscious, subconscious, whatever, but we hold them, and that's how we view our world, okay? So that's a worldview. Okay, I'm going to skip the next slide, because I've got too much going on, all right? 3 things about worldviews. The first thing about worldviews is that worldviews are exclusive, okay? Nobody, I don't think anybody likes the idea of exclusivity, right? But everybody, this is just how logic works. Everybody is exclusive when it comes to worldviews. Why? Because whenever you believe something, you automatically disbelieve something else. Whenever you stand up for something, you automatically oppose something else. Even things that sound very inclusive are in fact exclusive. For example, right, if you believe it doesn't matter if God exists, people who believe in God, people who don't believe in God, they have their fights, but it really doesn't matter, right? If that's your position, right, you are functionally disbelieving the atheist position and the theist position. You are disbelieving that it does matter, right? If you believe there's no universal standard for morality, like you say, everybody or every culture can define for themselves what's right or what's wrong. It's up to them. I don't want to enforce anything, right? If that's your view, you are disbelieving every belief system that says there is a universal standard of morality, right? And in fact, the majority of the world believes there's a universal standard for morality. If you believe that there are multiple paths to God, this might sound a little controversial now, okay? If you believe there are multiple paths to God, that all religions are essentially kind of the same thing, okay? You are disbelieving every belief system that claims there's one path to God. So when you take someone like Jesus, right, and he says some controversial stuff, he says, "No one comes to the Father except through me," right? And if you have this belief system, all religions are essentially the same thing, the multiple paths to God, you're essentially disagreeing with Jesus. Okay, do you see that? You can't say there's multiple paths for God to God and Jesus is God and I believe everything he says, because it's just naturally contradictory, right? If you believe every human being ought to self-discover his or her own purpose, okay, you disbelieve every belief system that says there's a universal purpose. So this is a bunch of examples, but essentially I'm saying all worldviews, even if they sound nice, friendly, inclusive, right? They actually are exclusive. That's just the nature of worldviews. Here's Tim Keller. He's a pastor in New York City. He says, "It is no more narrow to claim that one religion is right than to claim that one way to think about all religions, namely that all are equal, is right. We are all exclusive in our beliefs about religion, but in different ways." I'm thinking about my girlfriend, Van Kim. I just asked her permission in the car to use this example, but she went to grad school at Johns Hopkins, and in class one time, it was unrelated to religion. The class was about the environment and stuff like that, and she said that the professor went on this rant about Christians, and he's like, "Can you believe," I'm paraphrasing, but the professor, something to the effect of, "Can you believe that so-and-so percentage of people in America still believe in creationism? How many of you believe in evolution?" And so she at that point, okay, so historically, it is true, Christians are branded as the exclusive group, okay? But he, in that scenario, was, regardless of where you stand on creationism, whatever, I'm not getting there, right? Regardless of where you stand, he was excluding Christians, right? Because he took a stance, and that's just natural. When you take a stance, you exclude other groups. People often try to discredit religion, such as Christianity, by calling it exclusive, but the difference isn't that Christianity is exclusive, while another belief system isn't, right? The difference is that Christianity already recognizes this exclusivity, right? Jesus says things that are naturally exclusive, while many belief systems, while they are exclusive, they don't recognize it. That's the main difference. So the real question, and I got this from Tim Keller too, the real question is, all worldviews are exclusive. It's not about what's exclusive, what's inclusive. So if everything is exclusive, then which exclusive worldview should we embrace? Okay? And at the heart of Christianity is the Son of God who dies for his enemies. Okay? So as far as exclusive worldviews goes, right, Christianity is about as inclusive as you can get. Because you have the Son of God, he's perfect, he doesn't have to die for people, doesn't have to mingle with people, and he chose to come into our world and die for people. Right? That's as inclusive as you can get. Man, I'm stammering a lot. I don't know why I'm stammering a lot. Secondly, presuppositional. Okay, so if you're getting bored, sorry. So the first thing about worldview is that it's exclusive. The second thing about worldviews is that it's presuppositional. Okay, I really think this is key. Okay, because a lot of people don't realize this. If you're not a Christian, really think about this. If you're a Christian, really think about this, because I remember learning about this my freshman year in college, and it just dramatically changed the way I talk to my non-Christian friends. So here's a quote from Francis Schaeffer. He says, "People have presuppositions, and they will live more consistently on the basis of these presuppositions than even they themselves may realize. By presuppositions, we mean the basic way an individual looks at his life, his basic worldview, the grid through which he sees the world. Presuppositions rest upon that which a person considers to be the truth of what exists. People's presuppositions lay a grid for all they bring forth into the external world. Their presuppositions also provide the basis of their values and therefore the basis for their decisions." So I realize this is a little bit heavy, but essentially he's saying everybody has presuppositions. Everybody has these assumptions, these basic assumptions they made about life, okay? And a lot of the times they don't even realize these assumptions are there, okay? I'm talking about things like what is the nature of God, okay? Or I'm talking about things like how do you know what is right and wrong? Or I'm talking about is there a moral code that even exists? Or are all humans created equal? So there are assumptions that are made that aren't scientific assumptions, okay? But they're assumptions that we made. There's a book called Naming the Elephant by James Sire, and he tells the story of a father and a boy, okay, father and son. And the son comes to the father and he says, "Hey, Dad, at school today we learned about the Earth, and the Earth is actually just floating in space, out in outer space, and there's nothing holding on to it. And I just wonder, how is that possible? What's holding up the Earth?" And then the dad says, "Oh, well, let me tell you, son. This phenomenon. It's called gravity. So gravity is this way we explain the way large bodies of mass interact with each other, and it's F equals G times M1, M2 of R squared." Okay, and then that's really cool. So why can you use a formula to explain gravity? And he's like, "Oh, well, that's just because reality is very consistent and organized, right? And we studied it, and you can assume that about it, and so you can use mathematical formulas to explain it." And he goes, "Oh, so why do you assume that the universe is organized?" And he says, "Oh, because the universe is uniform and ordered." And then the kid asks, "Well, why is the universe ordered and uniform, right? Well, why do you assume that?" And essentially he's saying, at some point or another, the dad's going to hit a dead end, right? He's going to hit a point where he no longer has an explanation, because the kid's no longer asking physical questions. He's asking metaphysical questions, or he's asking philosophical questions, like why does something even exist? How can we assume that we can study the universe? And so when we get there, okay, you realize that the whole world of science is built on an assumption that the universe is orderly and will produce consistent, repetitive results. And so if you're not a engineering major or something, I apologize for this. You can just tune me out for a few seconds and come back to me later. Where am I? Okay, so here's another way to think about it. So the Declaration of Independence, right? 1776, right? In it, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," right? That they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and yada yada, right? Okay, if somebody from another culture, maybe 1,000 years ago, were to look at that, they would probably think, this truth that you think is self-evident is not really self-evident to me. right? This truth that all people are created equal, we have unalienable rights. Why is that? Is it because human beings have progressed further now and we're smarter now than we are back then? Maybe, but the fact is, I think it points more to the idea that we now live in a culture where we have assumed all people are created equal, right? Whereas that wasn't necessarily the case. If you look at the traditional Indian caste system, that definitely wasn't the case. If you look at the white supremacy movement, definitely not the case. I'm not saying those are good movements. I'm just saying that a lot of people, they don't have the same assumptions we have today. But why do we say that? It's not because of scientific reasons. Through science, we don't say, okay, if you look at the value of this human being, you can measure this value, and then you look at this human being, you can measure this human being's value, and they're about equal. So I think you can say that all people are equal. That's not a scientific question again. It's essentially just a question that really has no evidence or proof. It just feels right, right? You want to say, I think all people are created equal, because that's just the culture that we live in, right? But essentially, that's a presupposition we hold, okay? And there's no logical or no scientific evidence. And so everybody, when you push them hard enough, they reach this dead end, right? This dead end is an unproven presupposition that they hold to for no particular reason at all, really, except for it just feels right, right? And you say that's just the way it is. The same thing what the dad said to the boy. You know, the universe is constant and uniform. That's just the way it is. And so all I'm saying is that we have these views, perspectives that are ingrained in us. Okay, they make our worldviews. Okay, because of our unproven, exclusive presuppositions. Okay, all right. That's number 2. Okay, so all of this will make sense in a little bit. Okay, so if you're not feeling this, hopefully you'll feel this in a little bit. Okay, so worldviews are exclusive. They're presuppositional, and the third thing is they're volitional, okay? And Van Kim actually asked me to change this word because she said nobody will understand this. But essentially it means you can choose your worldview, okay? That's all it means. You can choose your worldview. It's not like you're born with it and you die with it, okay? Because, okay, so if worldviews are as big of a deal as they are, right? That they explain everything you ever do, right? Why we came to Cornell, how we chose our major, who will marry, what religion you adhere to. If all that is based on your worldview, which is exclusive and presuppositional, okay, that's kind of scary, okay? Because if you get your worldview wrong, okay, everything else might be wrong. So that's a little bit scary, okay? But because you were born with a worldview doesn't mean you have to die with that worldview. You can choose a different worldview. And many people don't realize that. I was on a summer project, a Cru summer project in Southeast Asia this past summer, right? And I remember talking to a girl, and she was really excited to meet Americans, but every time we would bring anything up about Christianity, she would tune out. And I remember asking, I remember we asked her a question one time, and she's like, oh, I'm a Buddhist, so I can't really think about that kind of stuff. And what she had done is she had already ingrained in her this idea that whatever you're born with, or whatever you have, you can't attach something else, right? But that's not true, right? It's like I just got a new phone recently. Okay, this is a new phone. I got this yesterday. It's a used phone, but it's new for me, right? And the reason why I got it is because my old phone was being really, it was really messed up. It was super laggy, okay, and it couldn't charge right. In order to charge, I see what you mean by the mic stand. In order to charge right, you had to hold the charger in at like a specific angle and at the right pressure, okay. And so I had to create mechanisms, I had to create essentially like a pulley system in my room from the outlet and over like a book, and in order to charge it right. And even then, it wasn't a guarantee. I had to check on it every 10 minutes, and it was just a mess. And I had that phone for like a little over a year, and it was really scratched up, and the battery life was really low. And it was just, and Van Kim had been telling me to get a new phone for such a long time. But it was so hard for me to give up on this old phone, just because I was so used to it, and just because I didn't want to go out and buy a new phone, and I was super cheap, and it would function well. It could still take calls most of the time, and but eventually I had to I just had to give up essentially and get a new phone. And that's essentially what it's like to change a worldview. You're using something for so long, right? And it might work, it might function, It's not ideal, but eventually, right, you might need to give up, right? And it's possible. One of the most powerful illustrations of something like this, I think, is Neo in the Matrix, right? If you guys haven't seen the Matrix, see the Matrix. Not necessarily the number 2, number 3, but the first one. Watch the first one. Essentially, Neo is this guy who lives in this machine-created computer world. It's fake, right? And he's this pawn in this huge scheme, but it's all there is. So he thinks that this is reality. And then Morpheus comes along one day and he tells him there's a higher reality. There's a reality out there that's more true than what you're experiencing. And he says you can choose to go there, right? You can choose to take the red pill. There was a red pill, blue pill scene. You take the red pill, and then you can experience a higher reality. Your view of the world will totally change. Or, and he says, or you can go back and do whatever you've been doing, right? This is a quote from the movie. He says, I'm trying to free your mind, Neo, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it. And it's the same with worldviews. We can talk about worldviews all we want, but it only matters if you walk through the door. And so if you want to change your worldview, you can. Okay, I want you to know that. You can walk through the door. And choosing your worldview is probably the most important decision in your life because it affects everything else in life. I'm going to skip ahead a little more. I want to talk about the Bible. All right, so we talked about what a worldview is. Okay, recap. And they are, what am I talking about? Worldview is exclusive, presuppositional, and volitional. All right? And then now, everybody has a worldview, okay? Now the question is, okay, if worldviews are so important, how do we choose a worldview, okay? And what is the biblical worldview? Okay, so I'll talk about the Bible a little bit. In Christianity, God's revelation to us is the Bible, right? So there's two ways you come up with a worldview. You can try to figure it out on your own, or you can listen to what God says. Okay, so the Christian method is to listen to what God says, okay? And what God gave us is the Bible, right? The Bible is our collection of divinely inspired writings written over a period of 1,500 years by over 40 authors. It was written in 3 different languages, 3 different continents. The author list included kings and shepherds and fishermen and physicians. Very diverse. There are parts that sound like history lessons. There are parts that sound like poems, okay? But somehow, even though this author list was so diverse, the content seemingly is very diverse, there's one storyline through the whole Bible, right? And that's the redemptive plan of God rescuing his people from sin. Here's a graph of the Bible. I don't know if you can see it, but you can just try to see it. So I got this online. I don't know if you've seen this before, but this guy, I forget his name, did this study, I forget the name of the study, but he came up with this graph, right? He found 63,779 cross-references in the Bible, meaning you read this verse, and it seems to point to this verse, and you read this verse, and it seems to point to this verse, and you read this verse, and on and on and on. There are over 63,000 of these in the Bible, and so he made this graph, and so this is the Bible timeline on the bottom from Genesis to Revelation, and each one of these arcs represents a cross-reference. Okay? So the question is, how is this possible if there were 40 authors from three different continents, 3 different languages, whatever, from over 1,500 years? And I think the only way this is possible is because God was behind this. God wrote the Bible. And we read the Bible because that is the main way we can know God. So there are so many different possible worldviews out there, right? There are billions of them. There are billions of, I don't know about billions. There are many, many worldviews out there, okay? How can you even come close to saying this is the right worldview? What kind of arrogance would you have to saying this is the right worldview unless God revealed something to us? And that's why the Bible is so key. There are probably 2 groups here in this room. There are people who identify as Christians, people who don't identify as Christians. I want to talk to both camps, but first I'll talk to the Christians a little bit. Just so I want to ask, is your worldview, based on the Bible, or is it based on something else? Is your worldview based on divine revelation, or is it based on man-made social whims that come and go like cultural trends? And especially if you're taking classes in the humanities, Not saying that's bad, that's really good. I think you should educate yourself in that, but you'd probably, if you're taking classes in the humanities, right, here at Cornell, you probably run into some ideas that aren't super biblical. And it'll be easy to allow these worldviews to creep in. For example, right, one of the up-and-coming, it's not really up-and-coming anymore, it's been around for a while, one of the big ideas today in culture is secular humanism, okay? Essentially, it says that human beings are fully capable of being ethical and moral without God, that human beings have the right responsibility to define and provide for themselves value and purpose. All social work should be for the ultimate goal of making people happy, okay? Now, some of these aren't too bad, right? But if you really get down and dirty and look at it, and especially if you try to fuse it with Christianity, okay, essentially what you'll end up with is a human-centered Christianity. Okay, what does that mean? It means God just becomes a means to an end. It means God is really just a nice Santa Claus figure who wants you to be happy, okay? And he never gives coal, okay? It means God created the world for human happiness. God sent Jesus to die on the cross for human happiness. The whole church exists for human happiness, right? And so when you live like this, right, for a while, and then you go through a brief season of unhappiness, what do? You throw Christianity out the window. Because it wasn't God you ever wanted in the first place. It was happiness. And God was just a means to that end. And when you weren't receiving that end, God doesn't work for you. I want to get something else to work for me. Right? It's so easy for unbiblical worldviews to creep in and kind of taint your Christian worldview, slowly gain territory in your subconscious. And that's why we need to be reading our Bibles every day. It's more subtle than that. It's not just humanities classes. If you're an engineer, don't think you're lucky now, right? Right? You might go, don't worry about me. I'm in a community group, right? I read articles on the resurgence, okay? I'm doing pretty well. But the question is, are you reading the Bible, right? Tons of people, and this is me too, okay? We graduate from college, and we discover that so much of our spiritual food was fast food, okay? By fast food, I mean that so much of what we learn doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from compressed, compartmentalized, mass-produced resources. It's like, I'm talking about articles, blogs, Christian books, talks, sermons, deep conversations around bonfires, Christian songs. Okay, none of these are bad things, okay? But essentially what people do is they read the Bible, okay, and they dissect it, they take snippets here and there, they repackage them, and they sell them to the masses. That's what essentially all of these things are, okay? And when you do that over and over, it's like eating fast food all the time, right? It's fake, and it's not the real deal, okay? And so many people, and I was definitely in this, we graduated from college and we realized, man, I don't know how to read the Bible well. And that sounds kind of, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but that's really what happens. And I realized every time I read the Bible, it was not every time, a lot of the times when I was reading the Bible, it was because I had this Bible study guide that was helping me read the Bible, or I was reading in a group, and they were helping me read the Bible, and I don't know how to read by myself, right? The reality is most of today's Christian college students derive more of their theology from Chris Tomlin than from the Bible. Right? Not saying Chris Tomlin's, bad theologian, but like, you need to go to the Bible. There's a danger to replace the foundational with the complementary, right? So read the Bible. Just VK and I, even on the way here, we ate Wendy's, and we were just feeling so like, man, why do we eat Wendy's? I just had Chick-fil-A twice yesterday, and I got I love chicken sandwiches, but like, man, that's too much fast food. And so it's the same thing spiritually, right? Talk, sermons, like, otherwise, there's no reason for you to listen to me, right? These things are all good, but you gotta read the Bible, okay? And, so that's for the Christians, okay? For the non-Christians in the room, okay, I'm almost done, I'm wrapping up. I really want to suggest that you carefully consider the biblical worldview for yourself, okay? The claims of the Bible, if true, can drastically change the trajectory of your life in the same way that the trajectory of Neo's life was changed when he met Morpheus, right? What is the biblical worldview, you're asking? Okay, maybe you're not asking, but I'll tell you anyways. Here it is, okay? God exists, okay? He created this world to be perfect. He created human beings. Our primary purpose was to know and enjoy God, okay? And in this knowing and enjoying of God, we would find true life and meaning. However, from the beginning, we chose to sin, we chose to rebel, we chose to fall away, we chose to pursue creative things rather than the Creator. And when we did so, we warranted separation from God, we warranted death, we declared ourselves to be His enemies, okay? And because we all have sinned, none of us were remotely capable of bringing ourselves into right standing with God, right? We were all tainted, we lost our purity. But God nonetheless chose to love us. He sent His Son, Jesus, 2,000 years ago to live a perfect life in the form of a human man, a human body, and then He died a gruesome death. And in doing so, Jesus traded His innocence for our guilt so that we as individuals could be reconciled to God once again. And if you choose to admit to God that you've sinned against Him, you recognize that God has taken the initiative to rescue you from your sin through Jesus, and you ask for Jesus to be your personal Lord and Savior, you'll have a new life. You'll experience a new transformation. You'll be given citizenship into God's kingdom, and you'll be at the forefront of God's kingdom here in this world in His effort to reverse the effects of sin. And so that's the biblical worldview. And I really want Christians to carefully consider that. And I just want to say this worldview can satisfy both your intellectual and emotional longings more so than any other worldview. Right?